Hey friends, welcome back to The Phoenix's Tale, the weekly Harry Potter themed podcast where I am sharing my life story through a chapter by chapter analysis of the entire Harry Potter book series. I am your host Gabe, and this week we are wrapping up Harry Potter and the Chamber of Sorcerer's Stone. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. We are wrapping up Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone with chapter 17, The Man with Two Faces. So let's dive into our recap. So the chapter opens, we see that Harry is actually standing face to face with Professor Quirrell. It turns out that Voldemort, his soul, if you will, is sharing Quirrell's body, hence the Two Faces part of the chapter name. Harry manages to save the stone and doesn't let Quirrell get it for Voldemort. He wakes up in the hospital wing to find Professor Dumbledore sitting there waiting for him. Professor Dumbledore answers all of his questions except one. And the one question that Harry asked him that Dumbledore did not answer actually comes back, for those not familiar with the story, it comes back toward the end of Order of the Phoenix. And so we'll get the answer to that question eventually. But the question that Harry had asked, because he paid attention, was why did Voldemort want to kill him in the first place? Because during Voldemort's monologue in the room with the Mirror of Erised, he informed Harry that his mother needn't have died. She died protecting him, which naturally Harry thought, well, wait a minute, why does Voldemort want to kill me in the first place? So we're going to sit on that question for a little bit through basically the next 4 books. We don't get the answer to that, like I said, until the end of the Order of the Phoenix. So we see the end of year feast. Slytherin has won the House Cup again. Almost. Because Professor Dumbledore issued some points right at the end for everything that Harry, Ron, and Hermione had done to get through all of the challenges, if you will, for Harry to get to the final one with the Mirror of Erised, where Professor Quirrell is, with Voldemort sticking out of the back of his head. And collectively, our golden trio receives just enough points to tie Slytherin. Well, and I love this part. I absolutely love this part. Dumbledore gives Neville 10 points because, as Dumbledore says, it takes a lot of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but it takes even more bravery to stand up to our friends, which he did, in trying to prevent our golden trio from heading off in the first place to go through the trap door, etc. So Gryffindor wins the House Cup for the first time in 7 years, and it's the end of the school year. We wrap up the chapter with Harry mentioning to Ron and Hermione that the Dursleys don't know that he is not allowed to perform magic at all outside of school during the holidays, and that he's going to have a lot of fun with Dudley this summer. So that, in essence, wraps up Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Before we dive into the conversation this week, however, I do want to go through the September character birthdays because I forgot to do that last week. Should have done that last week and through the trapdoor, but, we'll do it here. So, in digging through, like the Pottermore official Harry Potter website and other sources, there's one birthday this month, there's one birthday this month that didn't have a date, but we're going to put them at the top, and that would be Stan Shunpike, the conductor of the night bus. Those of you who know. Those of you who don't, just wait. But the rest of the birthdays I do have actual dates for. So, September 3rd. I don't want to wish a happy birthday, almost as much as I didn't want to wish fucking Dolores Umbridge happy birthday last month. But we have Aunt Petunia on the 3rd. We have Cedric Diggory on the 7th. We have Uncle Vernon on the 11th. We have Andromeda Tonks, who we don't meet until Deathly Hallows. We have the one and only Hermione Granger on the 19th, and then we have Mr. Ollivander on the 25th. So a very happy September birthday to all of those characters. The first topic that I want to dig into this week has to do with duality and hidden identities, because this one really seemed to speak to my autism and the unmasking journey I've been engaging in for the last year and a half or so, realizing that I was autistic in the first place. And so I used my AI tool Perplexity for this, because I'm quite new to my autism diagnosis at this point. So let's dive into what that looks like and how it occurs. Autistic individuals often experience a profound sense of duality in their identities. Yeah. Before I go any further, the references that I found and used for this are in my show notes. This stems from the need to balance their authentic self with a socially adapted persona that helps them navigate the neurotypical world. Hence, masking. This social adaptation frequently involves camouflaging or masking autistic traits to fit societal expectations and reduce experiences of stigma and exclusion. The how of this duality lies in the daily social challenges many autistic people face. These individuals frequently encounter environments that do not easily accommodate their authentic behaviors or communication styles. True. Making masking a learned strategy to gain social acceptance, avoid negative judgment, or protect themselves from social harm. The why behind this behavior was what I was really looking forward to digging into, is largely linked to the profound social pressures and the adverse outcomes associated with being visibly autistic in a predominantly neurotypical society. Masking or hiding one's authentic traits often becomes a survival mechanism to mitigate bullying, discrimination, or misunderstandings. However, this creates a tension between the true hidden self and the outward performed identity, resulting in a complex psychological balancing act. This is where, when I was reading through the research for this episode, excuse me, I keep hearing in my mind my mother telling me, and this is something she has told me a lot over the years, throughout my entire life, that she knows me better than I think she does. No, she does not. Because of that. Because of that. My mother does not know me as well as she thinks she does. When she's claiming she knows me better than I think she does, she does not. This duality can have significant emotional and mental health impacts. The constant effort to sustain a masked persona requires substantial cognitive and emotional resources. Yeah. All that shit when I was a kid, I never wanted to go outside and play. Of course, I grew up in Redding, California. And if anybody knows the Central Valley of California, knows how freaking hot it gets every summer. I mean, Redding, specifically where it is located, it is not uncommon for it to get over 110 degrees in the summertime. So that was one reason I never wanted to go outside, but I never really wanted to go outside and play. And this was one of the ones that was one of the first aspects of being autistic, that when I went back to my childhood and thought, oh, this makes a lot of sense. All of the times that I heard my dumbass, negative, verbally abusive father claim how lazy I am, I wasn't lazy. I was fucking exhausting myself on a daily basis just to try to fit in, try to be normal, because everything around me was so confusing. And everybody around me acted like they were handed this manual on how to be a human being properly, and treating me like I was ignoring said manual when I didn't get that manual in the first place. And that is a common metaphor for a lot of neurodivergent types, especially when they are late diagnosed. They go back to their childhoods and start seeing the patterns back then from whatever memories they might have left. A lot of us don't have a lot of memories because of the trauma, because of how our brains just work differently from neurotypical people. So this was one of the biggest ones for me, because if back when I was in my 20s, late teens, early 20s, kind of sorting out and seeing my father's influence on my life and how I felt about myself, the laziness was at the top of the list. I was stupid. I was lazy. It was number 2 always when I talk about it. Turns out I wasn't lazy. I was fucking exhausting myself to the point where I literally could not function or do anything. I never wanted to go anywhere or do anything, because that was going to take an extra amount of mental, emotional, and even in some cases physical capacity for me to engage in some sort of social activity, whether it was going to the movies with my family, whether it was going over to their friend's house, whether it was it didn't matter. I was exhausting myself every day of the week just going to school and trying to survive that, because I knew I was different. I knew my brain worked differently, but apparently that was wrong. It definitely was wrong according to my father. And of course, when you're kids, you're just parroting what your parents tell you to do, especially when you're much younger, just because that's how human development works when it comes to the brain and thought processes and stuff. So that one that one really kind of lightened the load for me, is putting those two pieces together. It's like my father always claimed that I was lazy. I'd never be able to do anything or accomplish anything because I was so lazy. No, I was fucking exhausted. So, let's see, where did I leave off? Complex biological balancing. Okay, the dual identity can have significant emotional, mental health impacts. I'm sorry if I'm rereading stuff. I kind of lost my place. The constant effort to sustain a masked persona requires substantial cognitive and emotional resources, hence why I was so exhausted and not lazy. It often leads to increased stress, exhaustion, and feelings of alienation or loss of self. This ongoing conflict between internal identity and external presentation is at the heart of many autistic people's lived experiences. Amen to that. Research also points out that this identity duality is not merely a behavioral adaptation, but is deeply tied to how autistic people perceive and understand themselves in relation to others. Hence the feeling like I never quite fit in any social group, including my own family. The hidden identity is often maintained to navigate social environments and can sometimes lead to questioning one's self-worth or authenticity. Yes. I spent the significant chunk of my life not really knowing who I am, and it's only been in the last 2 or 3 years that all of these puzzle pieces have been coming together. Oh, my PTSD was re-triggered in October of 2022. Kind of roll on through that for about 1.5 years when I finally joined TikTok and I start listening to autistic content creators, and that's when I put the pieces together. Oh shit, I'm autistic. Yeah, I'm getting to a point where I'm working on putting into practice, but I only have 3 people in my life right now. I have my son, I have my mother, and I have my baby brother. That's it. I have no friends, no coworkers, no classmates, no anybody. I have other family members around, but I am not close to them on that day-to-day, getting through life type of support. I just have those three. So it's, yes, I can set boundaries and start working on that, specifically with my mom and my baby brother, because a lot of this, I am leaving my son out of the equation because he is my son, not my therapist. Something that I very much wish my mother had thought to do when I was about 11, 12 years old, right around the time my parents split up and the divorce happened. Yeah, I ended up being my mother's therapist I'm a parentified child. I talked about that several episodes back, and I will be talking about that again in the future as we continue on with this Harry Potter series. So, let's wrap this part up. In summary, the duality and hidden identities in autism emerge from a need to reconcile the authentic autistic self, with social survival demands. This duality is rooted in the social environment's lack of acceptance and the consequent pressures to conform, driving masking behaviors that have complex psychological consequences. Amen. As I just said, this is something I have been working on with my own autism journey and connecting to a real world experience. It feels like that is all I have done my entire life, except a couple of notable exceptions. Even now, I'm struggling to express myself authentically with my family because of how we operate. Yes, we technically live in one house, but the way my grandmother, my mother's mother, built this house, I have my own living space. And when I say living space, I mean I've got my own kitchen. I got my own bathroom. It's separate from what my mom and my son share, which is separate from what my brother has. He gets the little one-bedroom apartment over the garage. And because my son is an adult and I never wanted him to feel obligated in any way, shape, or form to take care of me, I wanted him to feel free to live his life and to figure himself out and to be happy in his life. Yes, he is still my son. I will always be there for him no matter what. But I did not place on him the same shit my mother placed on me, as far as the codependent issues my mother and I have with one another. But I am beginning, where I can, as they crop up in my day-to-day living with primarily my mother and my baby brother, Michigan brother as I call him, because I do have another brother. He's the middle child of the family. He lives in California, so, and I'm not that close to him, so he doesn't really count in all of this for me. Anyway, basically I want my son to have a much healthier, happier, go find yourself, go be happy, go do your thing, go test yourself, whatever you need to do to figure out what you want from your life and what is going to make you happy. I wanted my son to have free reign with that, with himself, because I never felt like I did. Like I said, until just about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago maybe, have always felt like my needs came last, but because they certainly did with everybody else. And I was expected to pick up the pieces. I'm expected to figure shit out when my mother can't, because she refuses to write shit down. She said to me a couple months ago, I like it better when you go with me because I don't think to ask those questions. And this was at a doctor's office, not related to the cancer, but related to something else. Really, you're just not curious about those things? And how is it my responsibility to keep track of you? It's shit like that I am no longer doing. So I do have a way to exercise some of these things and to start getting to a point where I am focusing on me, because nobody else gives a shit on a certain level. I'm the only one who can do it on another level. So yeah, I'm starting to take those steps big, but to actually put into practice is going to be extremely interesting. When, new friends and hopefully a new amazing romance and my soul family, if you will, when they start coming into my life, putting these things into practice is going to be interesting. But anyway, even now I'm struggling with my family as it pertains to my relationship with my mother specifically. I tend to just get so frustrated so quickly whenever I'm attempting to just talk about some of the things that have been building up for over a decade with my trauma event going back to May of 2013 and my PTSD we're going on 12 and a half years here, and I'm still not in therapy for it. And sometimes I just need to talk about things, but she takes things on these trains of thought that make absolutely no fucking sense to me. They might make sense to her, but they don't make sense to me. A notable one we had several months ago is I was trying to explain to her where my mind was about everything. Then, starting from the night I got the call from David's sister that he had died, that's my trauma event. I was dating a man named David at the time who died suddenly. And I was explaining how part of it felt like God, if he exists, in my mind, that's when I stopped believing in God, because a just and loving God would not put people through shit like what I had been through. But at the time, I was explaining that it felt like God was in my face saying, no, you are never, ever, 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 ever going to meet your person, because that person doesn't exist. You are going to be single and alone your entire life, and blah, 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 blah. And then my mother just pops up, well, why does being single mean you have to be miserable? What the fuck does that have to do with where my mind was 12 and a half years ago? It didn't make sense to me. And she does shit like this all the time. She always feels like she has to answer. When she's not flapping her lips. And she can't keep her mouth shut. I swear to God, I bet you half of the county at this point, just because of my mother, knows everything about my life over the last 12 and a half years. At least the stuff she's paid attention to. So, anyway, being the only one I really have any option to talk to about any of the heavy stuff going on in my brain is my mother, and she frustrates the shit out of me because I don't know what's going on with her brain that she can't just shut up and listen. I've got 12 and a half years of PTSD stuffed into my heart and into my head that I need to express. Let me tell you, and I'm going to thank everybody right now who is watching. I don't care if it's one person. I don't care if it's a million people. Thank you. Because having this as an outlet and being able to talk about my life in such a way that makes sense to me has actually really helped. Do I still need therapy? Abso-fucking-lutely. But in the interim, in the short term, I have been feeling a lot less chaotic internally when it comes to my emotions and my thoughts and everything, because I'm able to sit down and share them with you once a week. Thank you. Anyway, so what's frustrating about my mother with all this is that I immediately shut down and stop talking to her when she does any of that, because it is extremely frustrating to me, and thereby leaving me with so much more that has to be stuffed down to the point where I feel like a pressure cooker. I'm not talking an Instapot pressure cooker. I'm talking an old school pressure cooker that if you don't have that little vent thing you open at the top, the entire fucking thing is known to explode. That's how I am feeling. I am feeling so close to, the ping of the joints that clamp the lid on are starting to pop. Ding, ding. And I'm going to fucking lose it. And I'm going to fucking lose it on the only people I have right now. Except my son. I would not do that to him. But I'm about to lose it on my mother and my son, or my baby brother, because that's what happens when you don't have an outlet, when you don't have a safe space to vent things, to discuss things that you need to discuss that could ultimately lead to healing. So I'm a pressure cooker about to explode. Oftentimes, it's followed by her declaration, as I mentioned earlier, that she knows me better than I think she does, which in fact is not true because she doesn't listen. She doesn't pay attention. Not once in 12 and a half years have her or my brother come to me to check in on me, like genuinely check in on me. I had, about 3 weeks ago, I had a very rough day with my mental health. I talked about it a couple episodes back with my weekend from hell. And that Monday was my mother's infusion treatment. She's with the cancer. She's not doing chemo right now. Things are going well, but she still is getting the Keytruda every 3 weeks, which is what is supposed to help her body continue fighting, boost her immune system type medication. And we do that every 3 weeks. And I asked her, I said, can you do this on your own today? Because I am not doing well with my mental health today. I can't do this today. And so she did. She went on her own. It was no problem. But the only consolation I got was, I wish I could help you. Yeah, it would help if you would shut your stupid fucking mouth and listen and stop trying to take the conversation down these trains of thought or down these pathways that make no fucking sense to me. And yes, I have explained these things to her over and over and over again. It is just much easier to deal with finding alternate means to release some of the pressure than it is to keep fighting her at this point. So I'm going in a different direction. I'm not volunteering information anymore. I'm not, she's curious enough to ask. I'll be honest with her, but if she's not curious enough to ask, I'm not volunteering. So yeah, that really bothers me when she says stuff like this, because not even checking in with me in 12 and a half years, like really checking in to see how my mental health is doing. How can she know me better than she thinks she does? She doesn't. So we're going to pull things back to Harry's story. And we see metaphorically how this worked out for Quirrell. Yes, he could host Voldemort in the short term, but he was no longer living authentically because of this connection. And we've seen throughout the entire book that Voldemort had an enormous amount of control over Professor Quirrell, which is how I feel and have felt my entire life masking my autistic traits. Is feeling like, not necessarily Voldemort, but that somebody else was connected to me, and that my purpose is to serve other people and make decisions about my life based on, when my father was still in my life, I've been no contact for over 20 years with him. He's going to be upset about this. I just know he is. And 99.9% of the time, I wouldn't understand why. Because I wouldn't understand why. Because he never explained it. That was one thing. And, having my mother's disapproval out there, and, I'm getting to the point where I don't give a shit anymore. I could make this episode 2 hours long just from ranting from that and how frustrated I am. And I've been frustrated about that quite a bit recently. So we're going to move on. Others have control over me. I lost my place in my notes. Give me a second, which is how I feel. And have felt, masking my touch. Others have control over me, and I'm not free to live my life as I wish to. Well, things are changing for me, as I said, and I'm quite excited to see how this plays out for me over the next coming months, because I have been feeling, like I said, not just a lot better in relieving some of the pressure talking to you all once a week, but feeling like, okay, I'm on the right path to something here. I have no job. I haven't had a job in over a decade. I have no car. The one that I had was broke most of the time over the last decade, that I sold it to somebody I knew who really needed it and could fix it up. Got rid of that. I have no means to entertain myself in any way, shape, or form other than what is in my mind and what I can do here at home. I don't have a car to go anywhere. I don't have the money to do anything. But somehow, the more I keep working on this, and part of the reason why I was so excited to sit down and record this episode today is because I actually made it through the entire book. Okay, 17 chapters in Sorcerer's Stone, and I made it through the entire book. This was the first time in a long time that I have stuck to something long enough, because that gut feeling I have that the more I dug into this and the more I have been kind of fine-tuning things for myself and showing up week after week after week, I'm on the right path to something. So I'm really excited to see how things are going to open up for me over between now and the rest of the year. Let's just call it good through the rest of the year. Okay, we still got 4 months. It's only September 10th if you're watching this the day that it went up. So we'll see. And I will happily share all that with you. Anyway, the other topic that has plagued my life a lot is betrayal and trust. And as somebody who is autistic, I have an exceptionally strong sense of justice and fair play. Just to give you an example, I bleed maize and blue every college football season. I am a Michigan fan through and through. I am the type of person with that sense of justice and fair play that I have shouted at the refs when they have made a call that favored Michigan. When I know enough about football, I don't claim to know as much as a lot of you out there who are avid sports fans, but I know enough to enjoy the game, and I know enough to know that when a ref calls something that favors Michigan when it should be favoring the other team, I'm yelling at the refs. Not that they hear me, because I'm in my living room watching the television. They can't hear me through my television, but that's how I am about a sense of justice and fair play. It's like, no, I would rather my team lose honestly than to win because the refs were clearly favoring Michigan when, no, the other team just is flat out playing better. So anyway, just to give you an idea of that. And that always has seemed to backfire on me, which I fucking can't stand. I can't tell you how often my brothers got away with shit that when I did it, because I'm not going to get in trouble, my brothers didn't, I always end up getting in trouble for it, which was often followed by the words, usually from my mother, that I was old enough to know better. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have countered back with, well, so are they. Because being the oldest, I'm old enough to know better. Yeah, but I'm getting in trouble for something that brother did at the age of 8, or did at a younger age. No, hold on. I got to flip the script. I get in trouble for something a couple years later, California, because he's about 2 years younger than I am, and he's not getting in trouble for the same thing at the age of 10 that I got in trouble for at the age of 10. I was old enough to know better at 10, but he isn't, so no big deal. He doesn't get in trouble. It's shit like that. Okay. I argued back a few times, like I said, but that never held any water. Anyway, the other aspect of this is trust. And this is something that I have struggled with my entire life, because as a child, I never trusted my father to do what he promised he would do. I never trusted my mother to keep her stupid mouth shut about things. The number of times I remember hearing her on the phone with my grandmother, one of my mom's stupid friends or whoever, telling them about something I had done or said that they're laughing about, but utterly shamed and embarrassed me. And in some cases, maybe I felt guilty too. So when I would be in my room crying after the "what are you crying about now? Stop acting like such a poop, snap out of it" from my mother, I would get, I can't help you if you don't tell me. Well, why would I tell you? Because you're just going to go running to my father and tell him, and I'm going to get it twice, because I'm in here for the first time that he yelled at me and I'm in trouble for something that confuses the absolute shit out of me. And I feel stupid for being proud of something that he just completely verbally ripped to shreds and called me stupid, essentially, for being proud of something. Do you think I want to go through that again because my mom can't keep her mouth shut? No. That's why I never tell her things. That's why I don't tell her things. And like I said, the number of times that she would complain that I would never tell her what was wrong, you've proven it over and over and over again. You can't keep your mouth shut. You got to tell the whole goddamn world about this dumb, stupid, whatever, embarrassing thing to me. I can't explain my mood today. Like I said, I have been feeling better, kind of venting this stuff. A lot of it, I feel a little bit more outspoken because my mother's not home right now. As I'm recording this, she had to take grandma to the doctor or something. I don't know. Anyway, naturally, let's continue on. My choice of friends and romantic partners over the years have led to my being unable to even trust myself, especially in my younger years. Growing up with my verbally abusive father and a mother who couldn't keep her mouth shut about anything, how the hell could I trust myself to make the right decisions about things when everything I did based on their actions toward me was wrong? I often say that it always feels like I was being a human being incorrectly, as though somebody else had some manual about how to be human and I didn't. And being treated as though I were being stupid or difficult on purpose for ignoring the manual and not following the rules when I never received that manual in the first place. Like I said, that's a common analogy for neurodivergence. So we're going to dive into some psychology about this, and specifically the experience of betrayal and the lack of trust within family dynamics. It can profoundly shape the emotional landscape of an autistic person such as myself, especially one compounded with verbal abuse, parentification, and being labeled the easy child. I was the easy child because I just kept everything to myself and didn't make my parents feel uncomfortable. Especially my mother. She's very uncomfortable with my big emotions and doesn't know what to do. Hence the, well, stop being such a poop. What are you crying about now? Anyway, for autistic, did I say artistic? Like an artist? Autistic individuals, trust is often more fragile due to heightened sensitivity to social cues and past experiences of misunderstanding. When caregivers betray confidences or invalidate emotions, as in your mother sharing your vulnerabilities or responding harshly to your tears, it creates a deep rupture. Oh yeah. This can lead to a pervasive sense of being unsafe, discouraging open communication and authentic self-expression. Yeah. For an autistic child who may already struggle with articulating emotions or interpreting social nuances, this breach of trust magnifies the difficulty in seeking support. Abso-fucking-lutely it does. Yes, it does. Verbal abuse and parentification further erode trust and self-worth. Being parentified, the child expected to take on adult responsibilities, forces early emotional labor that deprives a child of normal development. Let me start that over. Forces early emotional labor that deprives a child of normal developmental support. In this role, the easy or good child label can mask internal struggles, leading to feelings of invisibility or neglect despite outward compliance. For autistic children who may have sensory or emotional needs that differ from neurotypical peers, this can amplify feelings of isolation and betrayal as their authentic needs are overlooked and dismissed. Betrayal in these contexts often results not only in an impaired ability to trust caregivers, but also a broader mistrust of social relationships, complicating the development of secure attachments. No friends. My entire adult life will start from adulthood. 18. So 35, almost 36 years for me. My entire excuse me, dating experience can be compressed into a single timeline of just 3 years. And yes, I have done the math. That's been my adult life. I'm sitting here with literally 2 people. Again, my son's not my therapist. I'm not doing that to him. That I can potentially get any sort of emotional support from at this point. This is what everything that I just talked about comes down to. Betrayal in these contexts often results not only in an impaired ability to trust caregivers. I just read this, sorry. The secure attachments. This impacts the ability to build safe connections later in life, challenging emotional intimacy and vulnerability. In summary, the intersection of autism with verbal abuse, parentification, and familial betrayal produces a complex web of mistrust. This environment demands careful navigation of dual identities, amplifies emotional exhaustion, and complicates the fundamental need for secure, trusting relationships. Yeah. So, let's go back to the book real quick. The specifics of betrayal. Voldemort betraying Quirrell, and trust. How many people didn't trust Harry, whether it was the Slytherins overall, the various mentors Harry had at Hogwarts, versus Ron and Hermione, along with Professor Dumbledore and Hagrid, are topics that show up a lot throughout this series. So we'll be diving into them as we continue along. Personally, as I have said earlier, I cannot wait to see how my personal life rolls along as we continue with this podcast and other experiences that are going to crop up that I can connect to Harry's story further down the road. So, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are heading home for the summer, but we are going to continue on. And I want to thank you all for joining me through Sorcerer Stones over the last 17 weeks. It has been a bit bumpy for me getting things rolling while dealing with my trauma, but I want to thank you all for your patience with that. So next week, we begin Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets with Chapter 1, The Worst Birthday. Until then, remember to have some fun with Dudley this summer, because he doesn't know we can't do magic outside of school. And I will see you guys next week when we start Chamber of Secrets. Have a good one.